So yes, thank you for that introduction, Eric. And the only thing I want to add about the Baal Shem Tov, a couple of quick things. One is that it's generally understood that if you believe every story about the Baal Shem Tov, you're a fool. And if you don't believe any of them, you're a heretic. Okay, so let's get that much clear. And the other thing I want to say is that a really wonderful author described a Baal Shem, and there were many Baalei Shem at this time, were individuals who lived at the juncture of religion and magic and medicine. And they would sometimes have potions or amulets or prayers that were used to try and heal people. Baal Shem Tov, Baal Shem means a master of the name, of God's holy name, and Tov means good. And so maybe he was the master of the good name or the good master of the name, but he was the Baal Shem Tov, certainly of the time. So I have 3 stories for you today, and each will involve just understanding a little bit about Judaism to make them understandable, but not too much education. But one thing you need to know is that every week there's the Sabbath. It starts at Friday at sundown, it ends at Saturday at sundown, and that is the holiest time of any. It's a time when one immerses oneself in the love of God and the love of everything, and to be able to spend a Shabbat in kind of devoted experience of that joy is really kind of the pinnacle of everything. Now, the Baal Shem Tov had a lot of disciples. They're called Hasids. And there was no greater honor than to be invited to his home for Shabbat and to spend the day with him in all this mystical wonder. So it happened one Shabbat that some Hasids had come over for Shabbat dinner, and Shabbat begins with a ritual, 3 blessings that are made. And the first blessing is a blessing over candles, and usually it's a woman who makes the blessing. So in this particular event, it was Hannah, his wife, who began to make the blessing over the candles. And she lit the candles and closed her eyes and began to chant the prayer. And as she began to chant the prayer, the Baal Shem Tov started to giggle. Now, this is a serious moment. You don't giggle as you're welcoming the Sabbath. But here he was giggling. And everybody looks around. What's going on? He stops. His wife finishes the prayer. And now it's time for the second prayer, the prayer of the wine. You hold up a cup of wine and you thank God for the blessing of wine. And he takes the cup of wine and he holds up the cup of wine. He's about to start the prayer and he starts to laugh. And he's laughing so hard his hand is shaking. His wife grabs his hand, takes the cup away so it doesn't spill. And he laughs and laughs. And now everyone is confused. But finally he stops. And he takes the cup back. And he makes the prayer. And everybody is worried. Everybody is worried. There's one blessing left. It's a blessing over challah, the braided bread. It's a blessing to thank God for giving us bread to eat. And as he lifts the cover over the challah to start to make the blessing, he doesn't giggle. He doesn't laugh. He falls to the floor with paroxysms of laughter, and he's just, if the Baal Shem Tov could do it, he was peeing his pants. It was just complete laughter. Now, everybody is very concerned. Finally, it stops. He gets back up to his feet, and they make the blessing, and Shabbat continues. Now, you have to understand it wasn't polite to ask the Baal Shem Tov serious questions on Shabbat. It was supposed to be just joy. So his disciples are waiting. They're waiting for the next evening to come so they can ask him what was going on. They make the Havdalah, which is the end of Shabbat. They're about to ask him. And the Baal Shem Tov says, look, I know you have questions, but let's take a ride. Now, the Baal Shem Tov had a carriage. And this carriage was amazing because when you got into the carriage, especially right after Shabbat, if the Baal Shem Tov was to throw the reins to the horses and let them go wherever they wanted, this amazing thing would happen called shortening of the way, and they would fly to somewhere else, who knows where, and something wonderful would happen. So when the disciples, the Chassids, heard that they were going to get a ride in the carriage, all right, we'll wait with our question. They pile into the carriage, and the Baal Shem Tov throws the reins to the horse, and off it goes. And it lands, who knows where, at the edge of a clearing in a huge forest. And they pile out of the carriage, and there at the very edge of the clearing is a small, dilapidated hut. You couldn't call it a house. And the Baal Shem Tov just walks over and knocks on the door. The door opens, and this man peers out. He sees it's the Baal Shem Tov, and he slams the door shut. Baal Shem Tov knocks again. Yankel, Yankela, let us in. The door opens. Yankel opens the door, and they find themselves in this really just basically empty room, holes in the ceiling, dirt on the floor, poor beyond poor. And Yankela is just so distressed. And the Baal Shem Tov says, Yankela, you had quite the Shabbat last night. Would you tell us about it? No, you knew? Oh, how could you? Oh, no, I can't. Yankela, tell us about Shabbat. Oh, Master, would you embarrass me this way? Please, tell. Well, you know, we're very poor. We live from week to week, and it's all we can do to save enough money to get the candles and the wine and the challah. And this week, I didn't have enough money to buy candles. So here we are, ready to welcome the Sabbath, and I have no candles. And my wife, Chennai, she says, Yankela, we love each other. Our love is bright, like the flames of the Sabbath candles. Can't we make a blessing over the light of our love? And so we did. And we made a blessing, and we didn't have candles, and we kissed. The Baal Shem Tov smiled, said yes. And then, Yankela, oi! Well, we didn't have money for the candles, so we certainly didn't have money for the wine, and I didn't know what to do. And my wife, Chennai, she says, Yankela, our love brings us such joy. Can't we make a blessing over the joy of our love, just like the wine? And so we did. And then? And we danced. I know we're not supposed to dance, but we danced. We were so happy. And then, Yankela, oh, you know, why do I have to say, Yankela? Well, we didn't have money for candles, we didn't have money for wine, we didn't have money for challah, and my wife, Chennai, says, we love each other so much. It nourishes us. It keeps our spirits alive. Can't we make the blessing over our love? And so we did. And then, it's a mitzvah. You're supposed to. We made love. The Baal Shem Tov turned to his disciples. He said, last night you saw me behaving strangely. I knew that this was going to be a wonderful Shabbat, and so I ascended up into heaven while we were making the blessings. And the blessings of this couple were so pure and perfect and filled with love that all the angels were dancing. And if they will dance, what could I do but throw myself in that joy as well? And that's the story of the Baal Shem Tov and his special Shabbat. Now, the next story is, I can't tell you the title of it. You'll have to figure that out as we go through it. But once again, it's about the Baal Shem Tov. And as I told you, the Baal Shem Tov was often approached by people, to help with this or that. Maybe they wanted an amulet or a prayer. But when the average person, the common person, had a problem, they would go to the Baal Shem Tov and ask for his help. Now, in this one village, this one shtetl, there was a couple who was poor beyond poor. They made Yonkala and Chanala look like kings and queens. It was so difficult for them to live. And the wife, Mila, would say to the husband, "Go ask for help. Go ask the Rebbe for help." The little Rebbe in their shtetl. And he was too proud, he wouldn't go. And every week she would say, "Please, Yaakov, just go and ask for some help." But he was too shy. And it happened one day that the Baal Shem Tov was coming through town, spending the day with the Rebbe of the village. And Mila said, "Now's your chance. He can solve anything. Go to him, go to him, go to him." But Yaakov wouldn't go. So Mila made her own way. She made her way to the house. She knocked on the door. And who should greet her but the Baal Shem Tov himself? She says, "Oh, Holy Master, I have troubles. We're so poor. Can you help us, please?" And he says, "Come on in, come in." And she told him her story. And at the end of the story, he looked at her with great compassion. And he said, "I will help you. But you must do exactly as I say." Anything. What is it? And he reached into his purse and he pulled out 6 gold coins. Now, I have to tell you, 6 gold coins for Mila and Yaakov would sustain them for years. And she looks at these coins and she says, "Oh, you're so generous." "Oh, no, I haven't told you what you need to do." What? You must take these 6 gold coins, and the moment you leave this room, you must buy the first thing you see. Buy the first thing I see? 6 gold coins? I can buy anything, of course. And with the rest, as you wish. "Oh, thank you. And she made her way out of the door. She turned to face the street, and who should be walking toward her but a woman cradling a duck, a goose in her hand, in her arms. And Mila thought, "This is great. This is just a goose. I'm going to have so much left over." And she runs over to the woman and says, Oh, please. What a beautiful goose. Could I buy your goose? I'd love to buy your goose." And the woman looks at her and says, "This is my goose. This is my favorite goose. This is the goose I've had for year after year. I would never sell this goose." Mila's worried now. No, please. You must. I'll pay whatever you wish." The woman says, "I know how to get rid of her. I tell you what, you can have the goose for 7 pieces of gold, an outrageous sum." Mila thinks, I only have 6. Well, they bargain and they bargain and they go back and forth, and it gets to 6 pieces of gold. And trembling at letting all this wealth go for a single goose, Mila does what she promised. She takes the goose and she goes back to her husband. She shows him the goose. She doesn't mention the 6 pieces of gold. She says, the Baal Shem Tov agreed to help us, and look, we have this goose. Yaakov looks at the goose. A goose. Oh, it's good for a meal for the week. I'll grant you that, but the great Baal Shem Tov gives us a goose? Well, maybe we shouldn't kill it. Maybe we can use its eggs. We can use its eggs. Yeah. Hey, whatever. So they go out and they put the goose down and it nests. And the next morning, sure enough, there's 2 eggs. Mila goes to collect the eggs, and as she lifts the eggs, her hand starts to tingle. They bring them into the house and they cook them up, and the smell of them cooking is just, oh, it's so wonderful. They feel their spirits lifting. And when they eat the eggs, their tongues are singing praises. Their bellies are in heaven. It's amazing. And they think, this is wonderful. It couldn't be better. Well, the next morning comes, and they think, we could eat one and sell the other. And so they do. And the person who comes first to buy it that first day spreads the word about how wonderful this egg is. And soon they're able to charge a tremendous amount for the egg. And you know what? They're becoming comfortable. They have some money now. And they're both so happy and so grateful for what the Baal Shem Tov has given them. And so it goes for a while. And then Yaakov says, we're doing okay now. And, honestly, taking care of a goose that spits at you, it honks at you, it makes a mess. How about we sell the goose and we get a cow? They're much easier to manage. And they're comfortable enough, so that's what they do. They sell the goose. They get a wonderful price for the goose. They buy a cow. And the first morning, Yaakov goes out to milk the cow, and as the milk hits the pail starts to sing. And as it sings, Yaakov realizes that the same thing is likely to happen. And sure enough, the milk, it makes them not only happy, but wise. And they're selling the milk. And people are coming from all around to buy the milk. And this goes on, and they're living much more comfortably. Until one day, Yaakov says, you know what? We're doing okay, and getting up to milk the cow all hours of day and night, it's just too much work. Let's sell the cow. What will you do? We'll buy a stand of trees, and we'll sell firewood. So he makes his way out into the woods. And he comes across this place that just feels a little different. No one's ever been there before. And he cuts down some of the trees and he brings them back. And do you have to be told, when he burns this firewood in his fireplace, the whole house is aglow with warmth and wisdom and joy and everything. And now he's selling firewood to the masses. People are coming from all around. and they are living a very comfortable life. So Yaakov says to Milcah, you know what? Too much working. We've been working all our lives. We're comfortable now. Let's travel. I could become a merchant. I'll go and I'll buy all sorts of goods, and you and I can travel the world and enjoy everything. And she says, that's not a bad idea. So he takes all of his treasure and he boards a ship to buy merchandise that will be valued around the world. And as they're heading out into the sea, a terrible thing happens. A huge storms come up. The ship is rocked. People are thrown overboard. The ship cracks. Yaakov is thrown into the sea, grabbing onto the last plank of wood. Sure, he's going to die. Everything is lost. He makes his way to a shore that he can see in the distance. And as he gets closer and closer, he sees that the sand on this beach is a pure white. And as he finally drags himself to shore and takes his first steps, his feet start to sing at the wonderful sand that they're walking on. If the goose eggs were wonderful, if the cow's milk was wonderful, if the trees were wonderful, this is wonderful beyond that. He's in heaven walking across this beach, and he thinks maybe not all is lost. He sees a trail, and he walks to the trail. He follows the trail, it gets to a road. He follows the road, it gets to a city, a beautiful city, shining. He walks through the gates of the city, but there's no one there. There's no one there at all. It's not abandoned in the way you would think. Everything is clean and orderly, but there's no one there. He walks around knocking on doors. Nothing. He goes through the main square, and there's a synagogue there. And off to the side, he smells something delicious being cooked. He enters this beautiful house, empty still, and is drawn to the kitchen where his favorite meal is being cooked. It's there on the stove. He calls around, no one's there. So he eats. And the time goes by, and he walks around, and there's a book open on a table. It's the Chumash, it's the Bible, open to the week's portion. Finally, he's tired. He goes to sleep. He figures the owners will show up in the morning, but no one comes. No one comes. Day after day, he's there in this empty city, enjoying meals that somehow amazingly appear for him, and studying Torah whenever he wants, and traveling this great city, but no one is there. Until one morning, he hears a commotion outside. And he runs down and out the front door, and the streets are filled with people. They're racing here, there, and everywhere. And he grabs one of them and says, what's going on? Where are you? It's Friday. It's almost Shabbat. We have to get all our food going. And everybody's racing. Well, what's he to do? But he follows everyone to the synagogue for Shabbat. And the rabbi opens Shabbat. He feels like he's in heaven. He stays through the whole service. He comes back to the house, eats, and comes back in the morning. And they have a wonderful day of prayers and dancing and singing. And at the end of Shabbat, to mark the end of Shabbat, there's another ritual. It's called Havdalah. And the last bit of this ritual is that you take some wine, You extinguish a candle in it, and then if you're of a certain tradition, you take your 2 fingers and you dip them in the wine and you put them on your eyelids so that you can see the world through Shabbat, even when Shabbat is over. And so the rabbi dips his fingers into the wine and he applies them to his eyelids. Everyone disappears. Everyone is gone. There's no one. What's Yaakov to do? He's hopeful. So he goes back to the house and he waits the 6 days. He waits for Shabbat to come around again. And sure enough, next Shabbat, everyone is there. He goes to the synagogue. He has a wonderful Shabbat again. And the rabbi's getting ready. He's dipping his fingers into the wine and he grabs his wrist and says, "Stop! What's going on?" And the rabbi looks at him. He says, I noticed you. You're new. You don't know. No, what's going on? Tell me. Well, there's a story. Long time ago, centuries upon centuries, we lived in Jerusalem, the holy city. And it was wonderful living in Jerusalem, but I have to tell you, it wasn't as great as everyone remembers. Yes, you were there. Yes, the temple was there, but people, they weren't getting along so well. And things started to get worse, and we decided as a community that we just didn't want to live in Jerusalem anymore. But we still would have to make our way back for the pilgrimage festivals. So we figured it out. We found this place, this beautiful place. And he said, I have this amulet for the shortening of the way. And so every Shabbat, I would give it to one of the men. Every holiday, we'd give it to one of the men, and we'd gather up all the sacrifices we're supposed to bring. He would hold the amulet and imagine Jerusalem, and he'd be there. He'd deliver all of our sacrifices, fulfill our obligations, and when it was over, he'd hold the amulet again, think of this wonderful city, and he'd be back. And we did that for year after year. Until one year, he came back. His clothes were covered with ash and dark soot. Tears had stained his face. Everything was a mess. And we said to him, "What's happened? What's happened?" And he burst into tears. He said, "The temple, it's destroyed. There's nothing left. It's on fire." What were we to do? We prayed and prayed for guidance. And a voice came to us and said, "You have been so devoted. You have been so filled with the love for your God that a decree has been made. You may use your amulet for the shortening of the way to come and visit heaven. And you can come as long as you like." And we thought about it. And we asked, there's nothing more special than Shabbat on earth. Could we come back for Shabbat? And the voice said, certainly. And so that's what we do. Every Havdalah, at the end of Shabbat, we hold that amulet and we're all back in heaven. And every Friday afternoon, where there's still time to make preparations, we all come back and prepare and celebrate Shabbat here. And you, the rabbi turned to Yaakov, you're welcome to join us if you wish. And Yaakov thought, it's a very kind offer, Rabbi. But I miss my wife. Could you maybe take me back to her? And the rabbi said, I thought you might say that. Here's what we'll do. Take this amulet, hold it in your hand, close your eyes, and imagine you back in the arms of your wife. And when you've arrived and you open your eyes, do one favor for me. Throw that amulet up into the air. And a dove will come and pick it up and bring it back to us. Will you do that? Will you promise to do that? Absolutely. So the rabbi gave him the amulet, and Yaakov held it in his hand. And he imagined his Mila and being in her arms. He closed his eyes. There was a rush of air, and he opened it, heard people screaming, and there was Mila. Right there, they embraced, they kissed. And Yaakov remembered his promise, and he took his hand, and he went to throw it up in the air, and the Baal Shem Tov's hand grasped his wrist. And he said, you've fulfilled your vow, Yaakov. But he pried open his fingers and took the amulet from him, and said, this amulet can do so much more for people in this world than in the next. And that's the story of how the Baal Shem Tov got his amulet for the shortening of the way. I'd like to leave you with one story, and then we have a little time. And this is a story that many of you may know, but it's a story that needs to be told now. As I mentioned, the Baal Shem Tov was a mystic, and he could ascend up into heaven and make pleas on behalf of the people and try and right wrongs. And one year it happened that he foresaw a terrible, terrible thing that was about to befall the Jewish people. And he made a heavenly ascent to plead for the people, but it wasn't enough. And so he gathered his closest Hasidim together, his closest disciples, and he said, we have a terrible, terrible situation. We have to take care of it. Come with me. And they headed out into the woods, along a path none of them had ever taken before. And they came to a large clearing. And in that clearing, the Baal Shem Tov said, go out and get firewood from all around and bring it together here and lay it in this particular way. And when the bonfire had been laid, the Baal Shem Tov said a special prayer and lit the bonfire, and up into the heavens went the flames and the light and the prayer. And the disaster was averted. Thankfully, it was many, many, many years before such a dangerous thing came again, but alas, such things come to the Jewish people. And at that time, the Baal Shem Tov had passed on. But his greatest disciple, the Maggid of Mezrich, saw the warning signs. And he gathered his disciples around them. And he said, "We have to avert this crisis. Come with me." And they went to the same clearing in the wood. And because the Maggid had been there, he had them assemble the bonfire in the same way. But he hadn't heard the prayer that the Baal Shem Tov had uttered. But as he lit the fire, he said to them all, "I know the place, and I know the fire. I do not know the prayer, but this should be enough." And it was. And so it was a generation or two after that before the next great crisis arrived. And Rebbe Moshe Leib was the one to whom it fell to try to avert the crisis. And he gathered his disciples together, and they went to that same clearing because word of the clearing had passed through the generations. And he stood them all around him and he said, "I don't know how to lay the fire, and I don't know the prayer, but here we are in this place, and that should be enough." And it was. And so it was another long period before the next crisis arose, and this time it fell to Rebbe Israel of Rishon, who had not been born when this happened, who knew no one. And he gathered his disciples into his office, and he said, "I do not know the place. I do not know the fire. I do not know the prayer. But I know the story. And that should be enough." And it was. And it is. Thank you.